Hello, and welcome to CheersToFearYT, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today we will be making a drinking game for Krampus, directed by Michael Dougherty, the mind that brought us Trick or Treat. The movie was written by Dougherty, Todd Casey, and Zach Shields.
Krampus follows Max and his dysfunctional family. Max is seemingly the only person that has the Christmas spirit in this house, and everybody else seems less than enthusiastic for the holidays, besides his grandma, Omi. As Max's cousins come to town and start tormenting him, he starts thinking about how much he hates Christmas.
Following his outburst, a snowstorm hits the town, causing the power to go out. Not even cell phones are working. During the storm, Max's grandma seems to become increasingly worried and on edge.
If you've not yet seen this Christmas gem, we recommend you take our drinking rules and watch the movie for yourself so you can experience it firsthand before we go into spoilers. If you have already seen the movie, we invite you to grab a glass of peppermint schnapps and join us for the rest of the video.
So as always, our first rule is death, and that gave us a total of 15 drinks.
Yes. I guess it's worth mentioning that we counted all kidnappings as death. In Omi's story, it said that they took the family to the underworld, so that's basically dying, I'd say. So we assume that everybody that's kidnapped is in the underworld and died.
Yeah, not to mention that Max fell into like a hellish-looking pit, I guess.
Yeah.
And we couldn't exclude that. Really.
Yeah, it would be too much to kind of pass up on. We assume that they die when they're taken.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing to mention is we did count one death in the opening scene, and we just assume that somebody must have died somewhere in that scene because like people are getting trampled or another person falling off the ladder. Like,
yeah,
it may be a stretch, but we're just making an assumption, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Rule number 2, as always, is screams, cries, and yells. If you hear one, you take a sip.
I just wanted Christmas to be like it used to be, but forget it. I hate Christmas! I hate all of you!
This total came to 21 sips.
Yeah, and there's not really much to say on this rule other than it's our second highest total for rules. So I'll just move on to number 3, which actually is the highest total.
Yes.
Which is whenever Christmas is said, and that happened 33 times.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas!
Hey, sis, Merry Christmas.
Oh gosh, I'm so glad you guys could make
You
it.
have no idea.
Unlike Black Christmas, we actually have some Christmas rules in our Christmas-themed horror episode.
Yeah.
So this starts off with a bang, as it's said 33 times, as you said. Kind of continuing on with like the Christmas-ish theme. If you see a fireplace, you take a sip. This came to a total of 11 sips.
And the reason we made this a rule is because we want people to recognize that Omi is keeping it hot, and it kind of plays a role a little bit later in the movie, so we kind of just, want people to pay attention to it, I guess.
Yeah, it's just something that kind of draws a little bit more eyes towards it if you're playing the drinking game.
So I guess we'll move on to rule number 5. It's whenever you see a snowman, and this also gave us 11 drinks.
Yes, it's one of the few scenes that we managed to mercy just because there was a lot in the front yard and we really couldn't count them all. So obviously over 5 sips, that's a mercy rule per scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, mercied. Let's move on to the next rule, which is if you hear a Christmas song, you take a sip. And this total came to 10 sips.
And it's worth mentioning, like you said before, that this has a lot more Christmas rules involved than Black Christmas. Just because this is kind of bleeding with Christmas spirit.
Exactly. Yeah, this, I'd say, actually feels like a Christmas movie in comparison to Black Christmas. Just in terms of like kind of spending it with your family, seeing all the decorations, all of that. But it definitely feels a lot more Christmassy than the former, for sure.
Yeah, and it's a good representation on like family dynamics in a lot of people's cases, I guess. Like, it seems like you dislike them a lot of times, you get into arguments and stuff. But in the end, you do like each other deep down. Like, you kind of get along, but you also argue. It's a good representation of that. Anyways, on to rule number 7. It's whenever Max is bullied or gets into a fight. This resulted in 5 sips.
That's one thing I really like about Max in this movie. He sticks up to himself. So, for example, I think in the opening scene, they go back inside and they say, like, his parents mentioned how it's like, why do you even take on this guy? He was like twice your size. So he's just kind of a character that stands up for himself, kind of fights what he believes in, even though he knows he's gonna get attacked anyways.
Yeah, it kind of gives his character some depth, and he fights for what he believes in.
Yeah. Now on to another, I'd say, common rule for a lot of our drinking games is if you see alcohol, you take a sip. The main reason for this rule is Aunt Dorothy, who is an absolute gem in this movie. So I don't know why people really don't invite her over all that much. It seems like she's kind of the black sheep of the family and is borderline disliked, I'd say.
And now we'll move on to a couple rules that feature Omi, I guess. The first one being whenever Omi speaks German. This resulted in 10 sips.
Na, bist du fertig damit?
I started, but I don't know what to ask for this year.
I could say you could call Omi, I'd say, one of the best characters in the film. There's obviously like her, Max, Toward, and Dorothy. Like there's so many good characters, but I feel like she definitely stands out because she has like a lot of the plot like relevance, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially since she had to deal with the Krampus situation before.
Yeah, exactly.
And that moves us on to our last rule, which is whenever Omi says something ominous, you take a sip, and that led to 7 sips.
And you mentioned how she actually experienced Krampus in previous times or whatever, and it's kind of interesting to see how it actually affected her. And that being said, I feel like she probably could have prevented this somehow, knowing about Krampus and knowing who he was, but who knows. So that wraps up all the rules we have for the Krampus drinking game. In total, it gave us 129 sips, which is just shy of 4.5 drinks, and that's obviously based off of our 30 sip per can scale.
So for this movie, I feel like there was a lot of well-paced rules for the most part. And in saying that, like, a lot of them happened, like, at the beginning. So, like, at the beginning, there was a lot of Christmas being said in Christmas songs.
Yeah.
And obviously, Max getting into a fight a lot.
Yeah, and then it like, the middle had another chunk of rules, which was, like, Omi acting ominous and, you know, seeing the fireplace and the snowmen. And then the end was more of the death and the screams, cries, and yells, which is pretty common for a lot of horror movies.
Yeah. I guess one rule that we also considered adding is whenever you see a new monster, there was 2 scenes that were mostly because of that, and it just felt very out of place to kind of only have it like applied in 2 separate motions.
Yeah.
So we just decided to disinclude it.
Yeah. And just speaking of monsters, I thought that the monsters were like super well done. Like especially the gingerbread man and Krampus, they look terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I guess like that's the thing. Like they were really like kind of like cute or silly, but then Krampus looked terrifying.
Well, yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. Yeah. And then I guess moving on to Michael Dougherty, I feel like he's a very competent director. It's a lot of the same kind of with like Trick or Treat in a way.
Yeah, and the way you can compare it kind of being like, you know, a horror comedy based on a holiday. So
Yeah.
Trick or Treat was obviously Halloween, and it just bled the Halloween spirit. And this being a Christmas horror movie, horror comedy I should say, it had full-blown Christmas spirit while still being, you know, funny and scary at the same time. And he does a really good job at making the family feel realistic and like, you know, like I was saying before, the dynamic of the family feels real.
Yes, no, definitely. The whole family dynamic feels like very, very good. Like every character is pretty fleshed out, except I would say Howie Jr. He's like basically a pointless character for the most part. He just kind of stands there doing nothing the entire time.
Well, I'm pretty sure he doesn't even say a single word.
He doesn't say a single word. He just kind of sits there looking like an idiot most times. The only thing we really saw him do is just like look at Auntie for a drink when she was making peppermint schnapps or whatever, and then eating the gingerbread man in the chimney.
Yeah, true. And other than Howie Jr., he does a really good job, or he and the writers, I should say, Michael Dougherty and the writers, do a really good job on character development. That's something they do a lot better in this movie rather than Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
Trick or Treat's more of an anthology, and they don't do, you know, they don't focus on the character development as much.
Yeah.
But this movie, he does a lot of character development, which I do like.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of surprised at that, especially moving from an anthology series to a full-blown movie. You would expect him to be like a lot less capable of developing characters, but this one, I'm very shocked to say the least.
Yeah.
And I guess speaking of like that whole family, there's a very passive-aggressive nature for a lot of the characters, I'd say.
Yeah. Especially in the beginning, they're like, they clearly don't seem to like each other, like we mentioned before, and like everybody's fighting at the beginning of the movie, just not really getting along. And the tone starts to change a little bit later when Adam Scott's character saves Howard. Howard actually thanks him, and then it kind of, you know, seems like they start getting along at that point.
Hey, Tommy. I just want to say thanks for, saving my ass back there.
Oh, well, sure, no problem.
Yeah, like it's very weird, especially since you see how like everyone kind of dislikes each other. Now you see them like all kind of huddled into a room and actually getting along. It's not that they necessarily like each other, but they're at least like tolerating each other at this point for sure, at the very least.
Well, yeah, they're kind of seemingly becoming more of a family, I guess,
Yeah.
as the movie progresses.
And I guess sometimes, like, it can be illogical, like the eating a ginger man that drops from the chimney, or like giving your kids brass knuckles.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, you just at times have to enjoy the movie for what it is.
Yeah, and sometimes that kind of plays into the comedic side of it, you know.
Yeah.
It's there to get a laugh out of you, kind of. So it makes sense. Yeah.
So with all that out of the way, let's move on to the Darwin Awards, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award can be given out to a character that made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have been easily avoided. This award can also be given to a character that is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Howard, for falling asleep and causing his son, Howie Jr., to get kidnapped by Gingerbread Man.
Speaking of Howie Jr., he is next on the list for eating Gingerbread Man. To clarify, he knows weird things have been going on, and he doesn't think about the gingerbread man hanging from inside the chimney as suspicious at all.
And the winner is Howie Jr. I feel like Sarah's comment sums it up best.
They're why some people shouldn't be allowed to breed. Your words, Mom, not mine.
I never said that. So maybe they should have to take a test before they're allowed to breed.
That, my friends, is Darwinism at its finest.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Krampus. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any other feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments who your favorite character in the movie was. Just one quick reminder, there's one more week to vote on for Horror Tuber of the Month. You can click on the video on the top or in the description below to let us know who you want to win Horror Tuber of the Month.
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next week's episode, where we are going to be making a drinking game for Terror Train. Also, just another quick announcement, we do have an Instagram now, so give us a follow on there just to see more updates and other horror content. If you want to check out our most recent video, click on the box on the top right. Or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games we've made, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying, cheers to fears.
Santa Claus is coming to town.